Okay, it's 6:30. I now call our meeting to order. And welcome back, everyone. And to the people that are on Zoom, we'll pay close attention to see if you have any comments or if you're going to put a motion on the floor. So bear with us. So attendance has been taken, okay? Approval of the agenda?
So moved. Atkinson.
I'll second
Seconded it, Ian Kitchen.
Any discussion? Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any conflict of interest for disclosure this evening?
No.
Adoption of the minutes, June the 25th, 2020.
Second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Committee reports.
This is,
The Finance
sorry,
Committee.
this is,
Pardon me?
Judy, this is Mike Chamberlain. I can't get through. I'm on the phone.
Okay,
Okay?
that's good. Bear
Sorry.
with us. No, that's okay,
Sorry.
Mike. No, thanks for letting us know. Committee reports, the Finance Committee, the half-year review. Peter Morrison, please.
The Finance Committee met on July 21st, 2020. Attending were myself, John Bigger, Susan Cassidy, Mike Chamberlain, Don Fitzgerald, Mary Kay Langdon, Brett McKay, Steve McAlinden, and Tony Spears from Scotia McLeod. The meeting was called to order at 5 p.m. The committee received an update on the performance of the post-closure fund. The fund was in compliance with the asset allocations according to the IPS. The second quarter was really recovery from the disastrous first quarter due to COVID-19. $328,000 was recovered from the $500,000 that was lost in the first quarter. Year to date, the fund is down 3.87%. However, the fund has outperformed the majority of the benchmarks within the market indices. Tony Spears advised the committee that going forward, volatility is expected due to the various factors resulting from the pandemic, bankrupt businesses and unemployment rates, for example. And it's also an election year in the US. The good news is that the fund has exposure to both American and European markets. In summary, the fund is outperforming the majority of the market indices, and volatility is expected in the future. However, the markets will continue to be closely monitored, and Tony is very comfortable that in the long run, the fund will meet its target. Turning to our operating results, Mary Kay reviewed the first 6 months for 2020. Year-to-date, Regional Planning Division has a surplus of just over $34,000. The Planning, Development Division is running a surplus of $67,964, mainly due to expense savings from an employee who has not yet been replaced. The surplus for the landfill year-to-date is $1,252,531. This is approximately $69,000 higher than what was budgeted for the first 6 months, and is a combination of higher revenues, primarily due to elm tree tonnage, and lower than budgeted expenses. Recycling was fully operational during the month of June. Sales for the month were down by about half of what was budgeted. However, there are expense savings for the period when recycling was not operational. The year-to-date deficit for recycling is $534,652, which is almost $108,000 better than what was budgeted. Overall, the landfill is showing a surplus of $717,879. For the first 6 months, power generation had $395,150 in revenue, which is $225,000 under budget. This is relatively on track for what the system has been producing in the past 2 years. Going forward, the budget will need to reflect this new reality. Factoring the expenses, the year-to-date deficit is $458,485. Overall, there was a consolidated surplus of $361,645,000 for all divisions, which is $26,990 under budget. There's a lot of numbers coming out here. All divisions have exceeded their targets with the exception of power generation. The CFO is pleased with these results, given the circumstances during the first 6 months with the pandemic. Don led the preliminary discussion on the 2021 budget. He advised the committee that this year's budget preparations will be somewhat of a challenge as a result of the pandemic and with other factors taking place at the landfill. The commission is dealing with an unprecedented planning, operational environment. However, Don advised that the budget will more than likely not be far off from our original 5-year plan. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 5:40 p.m. I move that the board receive the report of the Finance Committee dated September 1st, 2020, respectively submitted by myself.
Seconded, Mike Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Peter. Now, before we begin the 2021 budget recommendations, I'd like to say a few words on the question that we put before us this evening. We are not being asked to approve the budget proposal this evening, but if we want this proposal to be forwarded to the Commission's member communities for their consideration as laid out in the Regional Service Delivery Act, then the decision taken tonight, those communities will have 45 days to review and consider the budget. I will call a special meeting of the board for October 22nd for the vote on the budget. That vote will require a double 2/3 majority to pass, but this evening's motion will be subject to a simple majority. And now I will call on our Finance Chair, Peter Morrison, to begin the draft budget presentation. Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. Attached to this report, please find a copy of the 2021 draft budget the Finance Committee is presenting to the board for its consideration. The Finance Committee met on August 11th to develop the draft budget that will be presented this evening. If the board chooses to forward this draft to its member communities for review, a special meeting of the board could be held on October 22nd to consider the draft. We just heard that it will be held. If accepted on that date, the commission would meet its legislative deadline of November 1st for budget adoption. Due to COVID-19, the information session to update the regional advisory committees on the draft budget will take place in a different way this year. It has been arranged in consultation with the local service manager for the LSD chairs to tune into staff's presentation of the budget to the RSC board slated for September 1st, which is tonight. Staff had advised that they will again be arranging an information session for interested municipal CAOs, clerks, and treasurers, which will more than likely be by way of a Zoom meeting. Do we have any idea how many people have tuned into this? You know, from the RSC chairs of the advisory committees, just as a matter of interest?
Madam Chair, we don't know yet who will express an interest. As presumed, we didn't want to presume that the budget would be recommended by the board. We'll be reaching out first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay. During the session covering the review of the staff prepared draft, we heard from the CFO about the trends and assumptions in which the draft is based. During this discussion, the committee reviewed the proposal in detail. Staff were able to respond to all of our questions satisfactorily and substantiate the figures they included in the budget. In summary, the budget package attached to this report includes corporate services, an increase in expenses of $14,069, which is 2.5% over the 2020 budget allocation. Regional planning, excuse me, this is essentially a contingency budget to cover the possibility that the board may elect to initiate a collaborative project during the year, which is consistent with prior year's budgets. The budget represents a decrease of $4,971 in member fees for 2021. Planning and development services. Revenue for 2021 will be negatively impacted by the inclusion of a reduction in the amount of a second year previous surplus of $13,165. while total expenses are up over 2020 by $37,046, which represents a 2.6% increase. Despite this, there is no impact on the tax rate, which remains unchanged at 3.1 cents. Going to solid waste, there are many more moving parts to the solid waste division's budget as compared to our other divisions. Total landfill expenses are up $107,424, which represents a 1.2% increase over the 2020 budget. Other sources of revenue were reduced by $156,950, which reflects decreases in current volumes. In addition, the second previous year surplus was $205,787 less than 2020, which was atypically high. The net result of the above would see the tipping fee increase from $94 per ton to $99. This compares favorably with the approved five-year financial plan, which was forecasting a tip fee of $103 for this time period. Included in the solid waste division's budget is borrowing for two pieces of equipment totaling $515,000, as well as leasing a crew cab, which must be approved through the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board. Power generation. Budgeted revenues were adjusted to bring them in line with what the system is currently producing. That represents a decrease of $200,000 from the 2020 budget. Expenses were also increased to reflect the scheduled maintenance required on the engines, which increases as the engines become older. In 2020, a second previous year deficit of $384,919 was brought into the budget, whereas the fund has a surplus of $38,688 brought into the 2021's budget. In order to balance the fund, which is required under the Region Service Delivery Act, $80,412 will be transferred from the solid waste operating fund. This is $133,917 less than what was required in 2020. Staff will be presenting this package to you in detail, and I encourage you to ask any questions you may have. In closing, I want to thank the members of the Finance Committee for their attendance, attention, and preparation for all of these budget sessions. All members were in favor of recommending this draft budget to the board, respectively submitted by myself. I move that the board receive the report of the Finance Committee dated September 1st, 2020.
I'll second that.
We don't need a motion right there. That was,
To accept the report, Madam Chair, but the second motion probably should come after staff's presentation.
okay. So we had you, and who seconded?
I did. David?
Okay. Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bulk of the presentation by staff this evening is going to be led by Mary Kay, but I'd just like to make an introductory comment. There's most uncertainty that we've ever faced coming into a budget year in terms of what the economy is going to look like, what the impact of COVID is going to be, how many businesses are going to survive. I think we're all bumping into that in our day-to-day life. We've worked hard to try to put together a budget that is neither fatalistic nor too optimistic. We're pleased that we were able to track within the parameters that you have established in your existing 5-year plan. And so it was a very iterative process. We had a number of models that staff looked at before we went to the Finance Committee. And so having said that, Mary Kay led the project and guided us through it. And we're very fortunate to have her on board for this. So I think that she can begin, and questions that relate to operating divisions, she may direct to the division managers to respond.
Thank you very much. Dawn, I'm not able to share my screen.
Okay, can you do that, Johnny? Can you right click on her and? I think if you click the share screen option.
Where is that?
For yourself. There you go. And you can, there are multiple. How's that, Mary Kay?
Okay, let me give it a try again.
All right,
Yes, I'm good.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Johnny.
Excellent. Well, hi, everyone. It's good to be with you tonight. I'll jump right into the details for you. So there's several assumptions that will cross different divisions. So the three of those being our salary ranges for the year were increased by 2.25% for each division. And this just really reflects an increase in inflation. It's very uncertain what that's going to be come the end of the year, and it was our best estimate that we could make while keeping in mind the needs of our staff and what they are seeing for increases in food as well as monthly increases. Fuel prices are on the rise. They're down year over year, but each month they are increasing ever so quickly. So that's what we came up with salary range increases. For our WorkSafe premiums, we increased corporate services and planning and development services by 2% and solid waste services by 4%, which is historically what we've seen as an increase. Now, you will make note that after this budget was sent out, WorkSafe did announce that they were going to have a decrease in their average premium. The committee discussed what that would mean for the various divisions, and we decided to leave the budget unchanged because it was very insignificant and it didn't have a big impact financially. And any savings that we do realize will come through in the way of a second previous year surplus in 2023 anyway. And then the last one were the health and dental benefits. And we were fortunate to have an agreement with Blue Cross where they're holding our rates constant. So those remain unchanged in the 2021 budget. So we will get right into the figures. The first budget that you see before you. Sorry, did someone say something? Everything's good? Okay, so the first budget that you have before you is the corporate services. So these are really the expenses that benefit the entire corporate or commission as a whole. So what you see is, and I'll focus on the major lines. So if we start salaries and benefits, so anybody that works corporately, their salaries get allocated out to the various divisions based on the amount of time that they would spend working on those various divisions. So we currently have 4 staff members that are included in there. We used to have 3, but we did bring a new staff member on in 2019. So that's included in the 2021 budget. So we have a total budget for 2021 of $402,260. That's up slightly from the previous year, as I mentioned, with that additional staff member. Although the salaries are relatively consistent, we do now have 2 employees that we're paying the benefits for. And then you can see how that's broken out based on the various divisions in the 4 columns to the right of that 2021 column. For governance, so that would be your board expenses. We saw a decrease in the 2021 budget. So that budget came in at $61,500. If we dive a little deeper into the details, you'll see honorariums were decreased, and that really just reflects what the actual meeting schedule that's being held, and it is subject to that 2.5% increase as well. Our meeting expenses were increased. Just with the addition of Zoom, there are some additional costs with relation to that. So we've increased those costs. Travel obviously is down because for the foreseeable future, we likely will be meeting on Zoom. So those have been reduced. And then training and development we've increased because will have a new board in 2021. So orientating them and getting them up to speed will have some costs included as well. On the administration side, the budget is relatively consistent with what we saw for 2020's budget. So that has a budget of $153,903. So adding those expenses all together gives you the total corporate services expenses for 2021's budget of $617,663. And then, like I said before, those expenses are allocated based on how the different divisions use them. So these 4 columns over to your right, the first one being the $90,176, that is what cooperative and regional planning will pay. So when we get into that budget, you'll see that expense come over there because that's what they're expected to pay. For planning and development, they're going to pay $185,371. Solid waste services, they'll pay $331,062, and then power generation will pay the $11,053. I'll just pause there. I'll try to pause after every page just in case anybody has any questions. Any questions on corporate services? All right, great. So moving right along brings us to cooperative and regional planning services. So what I'll do for these smaller divisions, I'll start with the expenses, because basically when we build a budget, what we do is we say, what do we need for expenses? Then you take your other sources of revenue off, and that determines really what your fee is going to be. So that would be your tipping fee, that would be your member fee, your planning and inspection service fees. That's how we come up with what we need at the end of the day. So if we start with expenses, for regional planning, we have a $20,000 budget. That's the same as what we had in the 2020 budget. And as Peter mentioned in the report, that's really just a contingency in case the board does decide to do some level of activity at the regional planning. And then for the allocation from corporate services, which we saw on the previous page, that's the $90,176. Adding those two expenses together, you come up with $110,176. Then if you jump back up to the revenue, you can see we had a second previous year surplus come in for our budget for 2021 of $37,117. So the expenses less that second previous year surplus gives you what we have to charge the membership. And that for the 2021 budget totals $73,059. And that's almost a $5,000 decrease from the previous year's budget. So if I skip to the next page, that will bring you to what you're all interested in. What is that going to cost my various municipality or local service district? So if I take the top one, Cambridge Narrows, the way that this fee is allocated is it's 50% based on the tax base, 50% based on the population. So for Cambridge Narrows for 2021, their fee for RSC11 membership is $411. That's a $33 decrease from 2020. So you can find your various municipality and see what that's going to cost you. And then overall, we are down the $4,971 you can see at the bottom. Any questions on cooperative and regional planning? All right. We'll move along to planning and development services. So again, we'll start with the expenses here, and I'll keep it to the major line items and give you the detail as needed. So for administration expenses for 2021, we have a budget of $471,498. That is a $24,000 increase from the previous year's budget. And there's a couple major things that make that up. The first being the salaries and benefits. So that's just a straight 2.25% increase, and it actually comes out to less than that, but that's what that increase is there. Our rental agreement, there was an increase to that in 2021, so that reflects the increase to the rent costs. And then the biggest one is office expenses. That's up almost $11,000 from the previous year's budget. And that really just has to do with COVID and cleaning supplies, sanitation, PPE. So that's reflected in there as well. For building inspection services, we have a budget for 2021 of $344,566. It's almost up $15,000 from the previous year. And that solely relates to our increase in salaries and benefits. And the reason for that increase is we are seeing a significant increase in the volume of activity that's being done. So currently we have a couple of seasonal inspectors that come on in the summer months, and we've increased their weekly hours just to reflect that volume and meet the demand that's out there. So in the past, they would work like 16 hours a week. They're up to almost 23 hours a week. So that's what's reflected in the 2021 budget. For planning and development expenses, we have a budget of $472,492. That's down slightly from the previous year's budget by about $2,600. And then planning advisory service is down again from the previous year's budget for a total of $13,500. Then you will see your allocation from corporate services. So planning and development share was that $185,371, which gives you total expenses of $1,487,427. So jumping back up to the top, we have some other sources of revenue of $3,000. That's down slightly from what we had in the previous year. And then the second previous year surplus for 2021 coming in is $6,963, which is about $13,000 less than what we saw in the 2020 budget. So we had some other sources of revenue that decreased, meaning we have to increase the amount that's coming from our participating members. So that leaves contributions from participating members total of $1,477,464. And that's a little over $55,000 increase from the previous year. However, when you work out the numbers, the tax rate remains unchanged at 3.1 cents. So this page shows you what the various local service districts, rural communities, or municipalities will pay. So for your local service district, in 2021, the fee would be $1,146,867, which is a little over $44,000 higher than the previous year. And you can see most of them have increased with the exception of Millville, which has decreased slightly. Do we have any questions on planning and development? All right, we'll move right along. So that brings us to the solid waste services budget. And like Peter mentioned, there are a few more components in there than there are in the other divisions, just because we do have debt in this division as well as capital purchases, some significant reserve funds as well. So I just want to highlight a few things that you're probably not going to see as I go through the spreadsheets. But this budget does include capital purchases that would be financed through the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board of a forwarder for $440,000 and a forklift for $75,000. Now, typically what we try to do is anything under $100,000 is paid for through our operations. However, given we were asking for a $5 tipping fee increase, management got together and we decided that we would finance this piece of equipment this year just to save that $1 on the tipping fee and not have to pass that along to you in a one-year time period. And what that amounts to as a cost, because there is an interest cost for the financing, obviously, is $4,500 over the life of the loan, which is 5 years. So it's relatively minimal, but we just felt that that was the right thing to do given the current situation and what we are asking for in the tipping fee. So what that means to borrow $515,000 over the next 5 years, so for 2022 to 2026, costs about $109,000 per year in principal and interest payments, or $1.38 on the tipping fee. Also included in the budget is a lease of a crew cab. We've estimated that to be about $700 a month. It's very small, but because it is a lease, it has to go through the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board, and the board must approve that. You'll see capital expenses as we go through. So our cell construction costs for 2021 are $700,000, and we are proposing to take $250,000 of that out of our capital reserve. So the net sell costs to the budget are $450,000. So what that means is if we take the $250,000 out of capital reserve, that will leave a balance of $1,610,000 in that reserve fund at the end of the year. All right, so this is just a summary. We break our budget up by landfill and recycling. So you can see on the landfill side that it must produce a surplus because recycling runs a deficit. So there's a surplus in landfill, deficit in recycling, and the two net out to zero. As we get into the details, you'll see more of that. So again, like everything else, the landfill, we always start with the expenses, we take away our other sources of revenue, and that really determines what we need at the end of the day as a tipping fee. But because this budget is so many pages, I'm gonna start at the top and work my way down just so I'm not jumping around on you. So historically, we usually finish the year around 79,000 tons in garbage. So that's the amount that we've used for the budget for the last number of years. So that is the figure that we've used in 2021's budget as well. So it's 79,000 tons at the $99 per ton fee. And that amounts to the $7,821,000. For construction and demolition, we have 6,000 tons, and that's at the $4,250, which is consistent with previous year's amounts as well. So no increase to that one. Our other sources of revenue are down, as Peter mentioned, and there's really two factors for that. We're seeing a very steep decrease in our ash that we receive from UNB. So that's reflected in the other revenue decrease, as well as the two pieces of equipment that we're going to sell in 2021. They're down significantly from what we've sold in the previous year. It tends to fluctuate, just depend on the piece of equipment. So that's what's making up that difference of the $156,000. Our second previous year surplus, we have $249,092. That's down almost $206,000 from 2020's budget. And the reason for that is really 2020's budget was abnormally high. We don't usually run a budget like that. We would put it into a reserve fund. But because it was high, you got the benefit. So now you're making it up in the 2021 budget. And then as we discussed just a minute ago, the transfer from the capital reserve, that will cover some of the sell costs. That's $250,000. So adding those all together gives you your total landfill revenue for 2021's budget of $8,857,000. So if we look at the expense side, for 2021's budget, we have salaries and benefits in the landfill of $2,646,200. Now that is a significant increase from what 2020's budget was. However, when you add the two salaries together on the landfill as well as the recycling, we've actually decreased our budget for salaries and benefits. We had a few employees that were working in recycling. With the new COVID measures, they've moved out into landfill where there's lots of work for them to do. So that's why you see an increase here, a decrease in recycling, and overall we've net decreased our salaries and benefit by one net employee for a savings of about $20,000. On the maintenance side, we have a budget of $850,408. This is up almost $74,000 from the previous year. And when you look, pretty much most of the line items have fluctuated. And that's really just to bring it in line with what our actual expenses are at this point in time. The major increase is to LGM, which is the landfill gas maintenance. And that's just the timing of a sulfa treat purchase for our gas treatment. So that's what's reflected in that increase. So they're just normal expenses. Costs are increasing with regard to the maintenance. On the equipment side, we have a budget of $915,680. It's a $12,000 increase from the previous year. And when you look at the different line items, you'll see fuel's down almost $85,000. That really just reflects the decrease in fuel prices at this point. And then our maintenance is up almost $98,000. And what that's made up of is 2 rock trucks need replacement tires, and to replace tires on a rock truck's $30,000 each truck. So that adds up pretty quick. And then there's an undercarriage that needs replacing on a dozer to the tune of about $50,000. So those 3 pieces of equipment alone are what brought that budget up to over $98,000 increase. For the baler, so this is where the garbage goes and it gets compacted so it can go out to the landfill. We have a budget of $522,500, and that's an increase from the previous year of $130,000. However, we have a major repair that's going to be done in this facility, so that actual cost is $230,000. So what we've done is we've been able to absorb $100,000 of that in our current budget to number by not doing a retrofit on our baler. Typically that's done every year, but we're not using our baler facility at this point, so we are realizing those savings and passing those along because of this major repair that has to be done in 2021. And I think it's mentioned in Brett's report later on, and he can give you the details with regard to that, but it's a major infrastructure that needs to be prepared with regard to the safety of the facility. For administration expenses, we have a budget of $795,500. That's an increase of $17,000 from the previous year. And again, the major increases there are just HST, which reflects the level of increased expenses, and office, which reflects the costs associated with COVID and PPE and cleaning as well. Debt servicing, the budget is $904,700, which is up $113,000 from the previous year. That's just the principal and interest on our current outstanding debt that's going to be paid in 2021. Post-closing costs are up slightly to a total of $251,600. So the closer we get to closing down the landfill each year, that cost increase. So just to give you an idea, in 2020, we paid $2.83 per ton for post-closing costs. In 2021, we pay $2.96. So it's an increase of about 13 cents per ton. For capital expenditures, the $30,000 relates to the purchase of a rough terrain vehicle, which transports our employees around the site, and then cell expansion costs of $700,000 for a total of $730,000. Again, we see our allocation from corporate services of $331,000. Transfer from power generation. So the Regional Service Delivery Act does not allow power generation to run a loss. So if you are budgeting a loss in power generation, you are required to bring that into the solid waste operating fund and pay for it. So that's what you're seeing here. So 2020 was the first year that that happened, and it was $214,000. In 2021, we've managed to decrease that. It's $80,000. So when you'll see a corresponding revenue source in power generation when we get there of the $80,000. So that's what that relates to. So that gives you total landfill expenses of $8,028,000. And then taking the revenue less the expenses gives you the surplus needed in landfill of $829,230 to then pay for recycling, which we'll get into now. So on the revenue side for recycling, there's 3 major products. There's paper, plastics, and metal. Total revenue for 2021, we're budgeting at $507,290. It's down about $13,000 from previous years. It just reflects current market prices at this point in time. And then on the expense side, we've managed to realize quite a few savings across recycling, and that really relates to taking a good hard look at our operations as a result of COVID and making the changes that are necessary. So it's a good thing, and we've realized savings as a result of it. So cost of sales, which are bin purchases, $10,000, that's consistent with previous years. Our salaries and benefits, as I mentioned before, the budget is down significantly to $789,700. That's a savings of almost $215,000. The maintenance costs, we have a total of $63,000. That's down $21,500 from the previous year's budget. Equipment costs, a budget of $106,100. That's down almost $19,000 from previous year's budget. The majority of that relates to savings with regard to diesel prices. And then the recycling baler, we have a budget of $164,000. That's down $8,500 from the previous year. And on administration expenses, we're up slightly to $127,000. And that relates to a new allocation. We're now allocating uniforms out to the recycling facility. And then for debt servicing, that's up $24,000 from the previous year to a total of $76,720. There's no capital purchases for recycling budgeted for 2021, which gives you total recycling expenses of $1,336,520, or a $348,000 decrease. So those revenues less those expenses give you the deficit in recycling of the $829. Adding the landfill recycling together, you get your balanced budget to zero. So I'm just gonna. So one final point that I do want to make, and I brought this up with the Finance Committee because it's important for everyone to know, and it really doesn't impact the 2021 budget, but it's going to have a major impact on 2022 and moving forward, is our EIA and the approval of that. So currently we're hopeful that that will be approved early summer 2021, because if it's not, what it means is the cell that has to be built in 2022 is going to be our most expensive cell to date. And it's more expensive than any cell we've ever built by a long shot. So the effect that that's going to have on 2022's tipping fee, if this EIA is not approved, is significant. So the reason I just bring this up and let you know how important it is to us that this goes through is that we really can't prepare our 2021 budget in isolation. We always have to be considering what's going on in the future. And we have to be prepared, whether it's good news or bad news. We're hopeful that this EIA goes through in the timing that we need it to, but we have to be in a position that we will be able to pay for a cell in 2022 if that doesn't go through. And I believe what we've prepared in a 2021 budget is something that we can jump off of if our ideal does not happen. So I just want you all to be aware of that. Brett's going to give you probably more information on the EIA than I can, but this budget allows us the flexibility to be able to meet the needs no matter what comes our way in the future. So just to summarize, this is a little table of what we had forecasted in the 5-year financial plan, which I believe was approved back at the end of 2017. So we had forecasted tipping fees that you'll see in this first column. And then what we actually had when the annual budgets were approved or presented in the case of 2021 is this. So you can see, with the exception of 2018, we have been under what we had expected in our 5-year financial plan. So that's always positive. We're happy that we can keep the tipping fee as low as we possibly can. So what that means is over the last 4 years, we were able to realize cumulative savings of about $710,500. So it just gives you an idea of what we expected, where we are, and the good news that we do have for you. So that is the end of the landfill or solid waste division side. I'll answer any questions that might be there before I jump into power generation.
Just a question on tipping fee. When we come to tipping fee, who is our largest user of tipping fees? Who is our largest consumer, shall we say?
Sure. So the largest consumer would actually be your ICI, which is sorry, you can help me out here, Brett. It's industrial, commercial, institutional.
You got it.
So it would be like your private businesses. It's not actually a specific municipality. Do you want to answer that in more detail, Brett?
Yeah, sure. Carson, industrial, commercial, institutional customers represent about 2/3 of our total tonnage. Largest municipality, unless I'm mistaken, would be Fredericton.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't hear any more questions, so we'll get into our last budget for the night, and that is power generation. So on the revenue side, we really have very little control over what that revenue is. Whatever the system produces, it goes into the engines and it produces kilowatts, and that's what we get paid for. So we have seen that our production has gone down in the last couple of years. So this budget really reflects that decrease that's been happening for a while. We've just never changed the budget to reflect that. So the generation revenue for 2021's budget is $800,000, which is a $200,000 decrease from previous years. We do have a little bit of money still sitting in the reserve fund, about $69,500. So we will bring that in to work on our engines. We might as well use it rather than run losses that we can pay for from our own funds. The second previous year surplus, we did have a surplus in the power generation for 2019, so we get credit for that in 2021's budget. So that's $38,688. And then, as I mentioned when we were going through the solid waste budget, because power generation isn't allowed to run a deficit, it has to be paid for from solid waste operating. So that's where this $80,000. So if this wasn't included and you just took revenues minus expenses, you would have a loss in power generation of this $80,000, but that's what solid waste is going to pay for. And as I mentioned before, it actually is an improvement from the previous year's budget of almost $134,000. So on the expense side of things, we have operational costs, which include our maintenance and repairs as well as operational expenses, totaling $513,610. This is up from the previous year's budget just based on our maintenance schedule. So depending on the number of hours that are on the various engines, we have maintenance that are required on certain pieces of those pieces of equipment, and that's what determines the maintenance costs. On the administration side, they're relatively consistent with the previous year's budget. We have a total of $52,765. Our debt servicing, so that's our principal and interest on the original engines. That's a budget of $412,172. And then our allocation from corporate services expense, that's $11,053. So that gives you total expenses of $989,600, and that gives you a balanced budget 2-0. So that pretty much summarizes the detail of the budget, but I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody does have anything.
Stephen has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I missed that at first, but is there any policy in place on how we determine staff salaries on an annual basis?
Madam Chair, I can deal with that. Yeah, it is a policy that we determine salaries based on our expectation of inflation for the coming year. And so we recommend to the Finance Committee a range adjustment for employees that is our best estimate of the increased cost of everything.
I just asked that because, I mean, 2.25, it's a good increase, fair most years. There's a lot of people struggling, people losing their businesses, a lot of municipalities that are going to struggle to make ends meet this year. I'm not suggesting we remove it or reduce it, but I think moving forward, have a very strong plan. I know ourselves, we do CPI and we base it on the revolving year, so we have a little better indication of what that's going to be. and that's usually close to 2%, but it's a lot easier to defend moving forward because we're going to be feeling the pain of this for several years to come. And, you know, it's public funds. So anyway.
Madam Chair, on that point, previous years, it's pretty easy to track. We're in a more challenging position than the municipalities based on the timing that we have to develop our budget. So we're trying now, we start in July, trying to figure July of 2020, what inflation is going to be for 2021, whereas municipalities are later in the year. But we've normally had a pretty good indication from the Bank of Canada, who have the monetary and fiscal tools to manage inflation, about what their expectation is for the coming year. But like everyone else, all of the forecasters, you know, they're challenged as well. Their target for managing inflation is between 2% and 3%. So we selected one and recommended one to the Finance Committee that was in the low range of the Bank of Canada's target. But there's no question it was more challenging this year.
Anyone else have any questions? Susan?
Got something there.
I was just wondering, Dawn, did you actually figure out, the committee I know asked you to check to see whether or not, like, there was any comparisons with the tipping fees and how we were doing as a community when it comes to the tipping fees in relation to other service areas?
Good question, Madam Chair. There are really only two comparable landfills in the province to us. That's the Moncton and St. John one. The Coles Note version is that we're cheaper than those, but I'd refer that to Brett, who has the exact details.
Okay. Because we were, okay, go ahead, Brett, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I've got it on a file on my desktop here, and I hope I don't lose you when I go to it, but we're significantly lower than them, Susan. Let me just see. Bear with me. I'm not running away if I disconnect here.
Brett,
Yes.
I can actually help you out because I have it on my phone here.
Oh, do you? Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So the other municipalities, the other solid service commissions, if you look at their websites, they charge a variety of different fees. So I'm just going to quote you one. But for Fundy, for municipal, they charge 108 per ton right now. And if it's unsorted, it's 216 per ton. And for...
Sorry, Mary Kay, what was the second one?
216 if it's unsorted.
Okay.
And then for Moncton area, their mixed landfill is 116 per ton.
And is ours considered mixed?
Yes.
Ours would be considered unsorted, Madam Chair.
Unsorted, okay, thank you.
So the $200 one is apples to apples comparison with us in St. John.
Right.
Okay.
Anything more, Susan?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Does anyone else have any questions? I don't think so.
In the absence of questions, Madam Chair, it might be appropriate for the Finance Chair to make his last motion.
Absolutely.
Okay. I move that the board forward the proposed draft 2021 budget and proposed borrowings to the members of the Regional Service Commission 11 that are municipalities or rural communities, and to the minister in accordance with Section 28 of the Regional Service Delivery Act for their review. That the chair call a special meeting of the board for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2020 to consider the draft budget in accordance with Section 27 of the Regional Service Delivery Act.
Seconded, Mike Blaney.
Any discussion? When I go to the question, Don, is Kelly going to ask each member?
She can, Madam Chair.
Okay. there's no discussion, I'll turn it over to Kelly to call on each member. Yes, if you're in favor, no, if you're not.
Okay, Susan. Susan Cassidy,
Oh, I'm deaf. Yes.
Bob Powell. Bob Powell, Mayor Powell, oh, he's muted. Can you raise your hand, Bob? Is that a yes? Hey, Peter.
Yes.
Ian Kitchen,
Yes.
Mike Chamberlain,
Yeah, yes.
Mike Blaney,
Yes.
Mark Foreman.
Yes.
Okay, Judy Wilson Chi,
Yes.
David Duplessis,
Yes.
Don Bigger,
Yes.
Stephen Hicks,
Yes.
Erica Burnett,
Yes.
Eleanor Lindsay,
Yes.
Carson Atkinson,
Yes.
Chris Reinhardt,
Yes.
Dale Mallory,
Yes.
Tom Nesbitt,
Yes.
Beth Forbes. Okay, and Leo Colleen.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Unanimous.
And did you get Mike called in?
Yeah.
Okay. So motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Move on now to the tenders. That's second quarter report. That's only for information only.
Madam Chair, and we do this as a matter of practice, but there were no tenders in the second quarter.
Okay. And now, 8, the annual departmental staff reports, executive director's report. Don, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we go through a month, I start to construct the ED's report for the month coming up, and I did that over the summer period, and we were heading for a trajectory, and one day there was a provincial election call, and so a lot of the initiatives that I'm about to talk about are going to be impacted by the election and the fact that we're going to have a new government. So, and that doesn't mean that I know that the Tories aren't going to win. Even if the Tories win, it's a new government. It will have a new roster of players, and already they're making platform commitments that weren't in their previous platform. So, I can't predict what that's going to be, but it will have impact and perhaps some pretty substantive impact on some of the things that we've been working on. So just to summarize, on the governance side of things, since we really last sat down and had a good chat, our response to COVID in the province has matured. And after dealing with the initial curve in an attempt to flatten it, there's been an opportunity for some people to provide a little longer term thought. The province is structuring 12 resiliency planning committees, one for each regional service area. And that group will include people from municipalities and local service districts, non-government organizations, First Nations, private sector reps, people from the province of New Brunswick in different departments, and they'll develop an action plan for responding to COVID and also trying to put into place a more resilient infrastructure for whatever is coming next. I was invited to be on that committee, and I accepted it because it's an opportunity for your input to flow to the group and for information from the group to flow to you. I can be that conduit. Attached to my report is some of the rationale behind the resilience planning initiative. There's been one meeting of the group that I had a conflict, I couldn't attend, but I did have a follow-up session with the coordinator for Region 11, a lady by the name of Jennifer Hogan, who works for the Health Authority. And in that discussion, I asked her if she would be prepared to make a presentation to the full board at our next board meeting in October, so that you would have an opportunity to see everything that I've seen at this point, and also to provide your input. And she's prepared to do that if the board wishes. So, you know, unless you collectively, in response to my report afterwards, are kind of lukewarm on that idea, I'll work towards arranging that. Shortly before the election call, there was a survey distributed amongst the Regional Service Commission executive directors and a larger group involved in local government with respect to voluntary cooperation in each region and what works well for regionalization. I completed that survey, but what I found even more interesting than the fact that they were surveying it was the timing of it. Like, why now? There's been, in terms of local government reform, there are reports upon reports upon reports dating back to the 70s. And then there was an election called. So I know that coincidence and timing doesn't mean that it's planned, but that's interesting to me. I don't know what will happen to that as a result of the election, where local government reform, where regionalization will land. I think the canary in the coal mine is what's happening in the St. John region with respect to their budget and the discussions with the previous government that just dropped the writ. So I think there's an opportunity. I think there's a possibility that'll come back to us after this election. With respect to solid waste, we've had an outdated provincial strategy for a long time. It's long past its life cycle, and the province has hired a consultant to help them develop the new model. And that consultant released his report to the department, who said that they would be sharing it with the stakeholders, of which we are one, shortly. Then an election was called. So I don't know where that report is now, what's in it, or where we'll see it. And Brett and I have endeavored to try to find out what that is, but so far with limited success. The other solid waste issue was packaging and printed paper, which I've raised with you a number of times. This spring, the department was prepared to issue their regulatory framework, the bureaucrats, to the government, and this is what we recommend, and seek their approval. And then COVID-19 happened, and they all went home and started to work from home, and the government focused on more pressing needs. Both the solid waste strategy and PPP have the potential to have significant operational impacts on us, and so we're anxious to know what's there. We followed up on the direction of the board that the policing committee sought to arrange meetings with all of the MLAs in our region to discuss our dissatisfaction and in particular what we thought was an inappropriate response from the Minister of Public Safety. And we arranged all of those. And the day before our very first meeting, an election was called, and none of them have time to meet with us now. They're engaged in trying to be reelected, except in this area, the public safety minister. So Carl Urquhart's not running. That will present us an opportunity. Whoever gets appointed there will have an opportunity to resend the letter to the minister and observe that your predecessor fundamentally misunderstood what we said. It's not an operational issue, it's a structural issue. And so allow us to sharpen the point on that pencil a little better. But we have to wait until after the election to get any kind of mind share with regard to that. The policing committee will be meeting on September 24th to carry on its regular business. In terms of common services, the big project that was taking place over late spring and the summer was the feasibility study on the pool. I can tell you that that is almost finished. I hope to be able to distribute that to the participating community by the, I believe it's the 18th of September is a Friday. That's the target date. I hope to be early on that. I can tell you that it will recommend a site around the Grant Harvey Center on Knowledge Park Drive, attached to the principal transportation corridors in the region. And in our October meeting, I'll be reviewing the executive summary and highlighting the process that we went through to get that. We talked about, on the risk mitigation side, cyber insurance, and we're seeing more and more examples of people being held hostage, hacking. It's an area of the economy that's growing, for sure. We've done a lot of work in terms of our systems, making them more robust, preparing to, besides integrating, preparing to move our servers to the cloud, to a secure environment. Since I wrote this report, we've received 2 quotes for cyber insurance, and I believe one of them's a package that I can recommend to the board, and I'll be bringing a staff report on that to the board in October. On the operational side, we had committed to you to do some work around climate change, and candidly, we're behind on our schedule on that, and it's due to COVID. It's and subsequent to coming back and opening the office in its new iteration, it's really, really busy on the planning side. We are being challenged to, we're meeting the challenge, but we are being challenged to keep up. People aren't going on vacation. I mean, you've heard this on the news. They're going to Home Depot, lumber's in short supply. People are doing things. And in my personal life, the September trip to Ireland is becoming a new bathroom. And I don't think we're the least bit unique in that regard. So, and on the landfill side, the main initiative there outside day-to-day operations is the EIA that Mary Kay referred to. And I'm going to ask Brett to speak to that in a little more detail. But I'll begin, I'll introduce the topic by saying we are looking to be able to build cells higher, to build on top of existing cells, because it is more affordable, and we're convinced that we can do it in an environmentally safe manner. And so that's what we're asking the province to do. But Brett, perhaps you could speak to the process that we need to go through to get an answer from environment.
Yeah, sure, Don, thank you. Essentially what we're going to be asking for is to go higher up from current elevation 59 meters to about 88 meters, I believe. And the process that we're going to have to follow, we've already had the first initial meetings with them, and they've made a determination, the technical review committee, that we will have to go through a full EIA. That starts with biological studies for the most part. We've performed most of those surveys to date. We should have them completed towards the end of the month. We then forward those to the committee for review. They have an opportunity to ask questions. We're hoping by December we'll be at the public meeting stage, and once we finish the public meeting phase, a determination will be made. a report will be issued and with a recommendation on whether or not to allow us to proceed to that height that we're proposing. And we're hoping to be there either late May or early June. Now, as Don mentioned, I have and he has followed up with the province on this, and it's not anticipated that we're going to be held up by the election. This is not a political issue. It's a more of a scientific and engineering based issue. And I guess what I had mentioned to the Finance Committee during our last meeting, I'll say the same to the members here. It's an important one. Mary Kay mentioned it has a significant impact on our costs going forward to develop. And I believe, Mary Kay, tell me if I'm way off, but it makes a difference between about a $100,000 or a $200,000 cell per year versus a about a $2 million, $2.5 million cell. So it's significant, and it means some real savings to our member communities, everyone sitting around this table. And so it's important, in my opinion, if you're able to support it, we could certainly use your support. It's a no-brainer. We're not proposing to extend the footprint of the landfill, only to increase in height. You can think of the shape of the landfill almost as a pyramid. Currently, we're allowed to go up to a certain elevation, then a tabletop. Quite simply, we're proposing to continue that elevation up to a minimal working surface on the top. So it makes a lot of sense scientifically, environmentally, economically, and that's it in a nutshell, Don.
Thank you, Brett. So those are the two sort of non-production initiatives underway in each of the divisions. Brett didn't take advantage of the opportunity to tell you that the construction of our cell this year is coming in on time and on budget, and I'm very pleased to see that. And it's because of the great team that Brett has built there. COVID-19, while it's been it's presented challenges to everyone, it's also presented us with opportunities and society with opportunities. On the 16th of September, I have a doctor's appointment. I'm not going to leave my office. He's going to phone me, And in our case, we've had process improvements in the recycling, which Mary Kay mentioned in the budget, and we're seeing the benefits of that. Operationally, the big job down at the landfill is upgrades to the leachate pumping system. Leachate is a pretty significant environmental risk, and it's time to make that much more robust. It hasn't been addressed in a long time, and it's something that Brett is anxious to upgrade and is well on the way to doing that. So I thank him for that foresight. On the planning side of things, I talked about how unexpectedly robust the system is. People are putting in extra hours. We've had to increase the extra hours of our seasonal employees. And I asked Stephen to give me a little context about that. I see everyone working much harder, and Stephen says, we're busy. And I says, well, how much? Can you put that together? And so that's the table that is in my report. Subdivisions are 64% higher than they were for the same time last year. Building permits, 21% increase in the number of building permits, 25% increase in the number of development permits. And on top of all of that, in terms of inspections, all of that stuff leads to inspections, but we have a new K-8 school going up in Hanwell, and so there are multiple inspections to that we're involved in. We worked with Fredericton Junction to come up with a new revised rural plan, not a significant effort. There's a 16-unit seniors complex in Natwick under construction, and approved, and in the fall, this month, they should start construction. So, you know, that's another big commercial. It's not a deck to inspect. There'll be a series of inspections to be made there. And finally, you know, we've talked to you before, Stephen's talked to you about how difficult it is to find planners, what a shortage of supply there is in planners, and how we've been down a planner for months upon months. Last month, we filled our position with a young lady from Truro, who's relocated here, Molly Smith. So that'll help us going forward as well. So that's my report, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to respond to any questions the directors have, and if I can't, I will make sure I'll direct them to the appropriate staff member.
Carson has a
Madam
question.
Chair, the question was about, for Brett, really about the going the height from 60 or the 59 to the 88 meters. Where else have they done that? I assume that you've looked at that in other jurisdictions, and how difficult was it for their environmental reviews?
Thanks, Carson. That's a really good question. As far as jurisdictions where they've done it, that's standard practice, I believe, and it's hard to go back and see the original EIA. In fact, I'm not sure anybody has been able to track it down, but we do have the determinations. We don't have the logic behind it. My understanding is that 59 meters comes from the old approach for the old alignment in the Fredericton Airport. They were concerned that the planes would be coming through there, and the birds up above may impact the planes. And so that was the logic, not an issue anymore. Since then, the runways have been realigned. We do bail. We don't have a lot of birds around our site, so kind of a non-issue. And if could you remind me what the second question was, Carson? Sorry.
Well, just other examples in other jurisdictions about height.
Yeah, sure. I'll just give you an example. We went to a conference earlier this year, just before the COVID-19 outbreak began. And in the United States, the thinking is that, and the same would apply here, of course, is that you can reduce your long-term operating costs by reducing your flat surface area at the top of your landfill. Really, that's an infiltration point. And so from an engineering perspective, it makes a lot of sense. From the environmental perspective, it makes even more sense. The alternative of not maximizing the area that we have currently developed is resiting a landfill. So, yeah, absolutely. Within that existing footprint, if we don't maximize the disposal within that footprint, we have to resite. And so it's really a no-brainer, in my opinion, both from an engineering and an environmental perspective, and like I mentioned earlier, from an economic one as well. So I think it's a win-win-win for everybody involved.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does anyone else have any questions for Don or for Brett? No? Well, thank you, Don and Brett. And before I move on to the next item, sincere apologies, Mary Kay, for not thanking you for doing a great presentation for the board. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might raise one additional point of which I have just become aware. We've had a challenge with our live broadcast this evening, and in fact, it's not going out over the night. And so one of the opportunities that we are missing as a result is for advisory chairs to tune in and see the budget presentation. So I'm going to reach out to Ivan Corbett to arrange a specific Zoom meeting directly for those chairs who wish to see the budget presentation.
That's excellent.
So, because when you leave this room, undoubtedly people will bump into you and say, we couldn't connect, because we have a wide viewing audience, as you know. And when they do mention that to you, you can say, yes, we're aware, and we're taking the corrective steps to make sure that everyone's informed.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Don. Okay, before I go to the closed session, I just want you to know that this is the end of the public meeting. So I need a motion to go into a closed session. Stephen
Seconded.
seconded. And